Let's break down the signings of Corbin Burnes and Teoscar Hernandez up next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Thursday, January 2nd. Happy New Year. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers, and a very happy New Year for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I realize these signings happened last weekend, but we haven't done an in 5 episode on them, and they're pretty massive. So let's talk about Corbin Burnes, who signed a 6-year, $210 million deal, and he's headed to the desert. The Arizona Diamondbacks love this move for the Dbacks. They swoop in, they grab arguably the top pitcher on the market. And for fantasy, Chris, we know Burnes will have tremendous run support, is a solid park to pitch in. What do you think about his fit in Arizona?
I think it's great. I mean, a lot of it depends on how real what he showed in September was, because we talked about it at the time. If you don't remember, Corbin Burnes lost his cutter last year, and it lost some of its horizontal movement. It was getting more rise. It wasn't breaking as much. And generally, in his words, it was playing like a bad four-seam fastball. He used slightly more colorful language, but that's the gist of it. And it was really bad in August, especially. He got crushed. It was the worst month of his career, basically. And he reworked the cutter. He got back in the lab and figured out what was going on, started throwing it more like it looked prior to 2024. I'm not saying there's any chance of Corbin Burnes getting back to like 2021 levels, right? Where he was the best pitcher in baseball. He was blowing everyone away with like a 96-mile-an-hour cutter that moved 4 inches. Like, he's not going to be that. His velocity was actually down a little bit in September, but the cutter played up much better. Whiff rate was 26%. That was the highest of any month last season. He had a really good month, a decent postseason start, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it just comes down to, can he go back to being an above average strikeout pitcher? Not the best strikeout pitcher in baseball. I'm not expecting that. But if he can go back to being more than a K per 9 or a K per inning guy moving forward, I think this is going to be really good, because like you said, it's a good park to pitch in. It's not a great park. It's right around average, but very good for power, especially suppressing for pitchers. So not going to give up a lot of home runs. It's hard to get a better lineup than the Orioles had last year. They were 4th in runs scored. The Diamondbacks scored 100 more runs than the Orioles last season. Yep. They're a better defensive team as well. Like, I think the situation is actually an upgrade for Corbin Burnes. And so he was already a top 5 starting pitcher for me for 2025. I think I'm not moving him up necessarily, but it's pretty easy for me to keep him as my SP4. And if there's strikeout upside beyond there, I think there's not that much difference between him and Zach Wheeler.
The ADP for Corbin Burnes in December is 36.8. Would you take Corbin Burnes or Garrett Crochet, who actually is going just ahead of him right now?
I would take Corbin Burnes. I like Garrett Crochet. He's a top 40 pick for me, but I've Burnes 10 spots ahead of him in my overall rankings.
What about Burnes versus Logan Gilbert? I think that one's really close.
I think that one's really close. I have a little more faith in Burnes. Certainly the situation, I think, is better than the one Gilbert's in Seattle. So Gilbert might be a better bet for some of the ratio stats, especially whip, but I think Burnes' overall package is still a little better.
Teoscar Hernandez is headed back to the Dodgers on a 3-year, $66 million deal. He's 32 years old, but coming off one of the best seasons of his career, hit 272, 33 home runs, 99 RBI, 12 steals. He was a top 10 outfielder in both roto and head-to-head points leagues. Chris, it's hard to imagine a better landing spot for Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, I mean, these are both Corbin Burnes and Teoscar Hernandez. The interesting question is, did any other team really have a chance to sign them? Based on what we've heard since, I'm not sure, because Burnes really wanted to go. Him and his family live in Phoenix. He's from the West Coast, so it sounded like he really wanted to go back. He took less money by all accounts. And Teoscar, he really wanted to go back to the Dodgers. There was a quote from John Heyman. He's 1,000% committed to going back to the Dodgers, I think was the way he put it. So I don't know if he was ever going anywhere else. The Dodgers found a way to make it happen. And yeah, you love to see it, because Teoscar is old enough and has enough plate discipline concerns that you could see things falling apart for him in the next 3 years. But playing in LA, everything that they do right, like you look at how Max Muncy has aged with kind of similar skill set as a hitter, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of power. He's aged really well there. you have to think they're going to get the most out of him, and that lineup obviously is going to get the most out of him. I think it was 99 RBI, 80 plus runs last year, 33 homers, 12 stolen bases. He's just a really solid 5-category player, and the lineup's going to get the most out of him. So I'm very happy Teoscar's back in LA.
All right, for more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we will be back again on Saturday. Bye-bye.